pop, Fukushima, the new Krakatoa. Fukushima, the new Krakatoa. Pop, which came first, the nuclear chicken or the nuclear egg? Pop-oppy dropped. Pop-oppy, they never stopped. Which came first, the nuclear chicken or the nuclear egg? Pop-oppy. Smells like spaghetti, must be Fernghetti. Huh. Pop-oppy dropped. Smells like spaghetti, must be Fernghetti. Kerouac, back. Where did you sleep last night? Don't you lie to me. I slept in that dead fucking pines with the suns of Fukushima, Japan. They always shine. In the pines, in the pines, in the pines. Where did you sleep last? Smells like spaghetti, must be Fernghetti. Kerouac, back. Pop-oppy dropped. Pop-oppy dropped. Tick-tock, Diablo Canyon clock. Pop-oppy dropped. Clock struck midnight 13 years ago tomorrow. What's Fukushima? Fukushima turns 13. Pop-oppy dropped. Ode to Fuktonium.
See Japan? Don't take your eyes off Japan. Keep looking at Japan. Look at that spot up there where it's emanating from. Look at it. Keep looking at it. This is day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. Look at that spot in Japan before it disappears. It's still emanating from there, still hemorrhaging from there, still coming out of there. That never, ever changed, okay? Keep looking at it. This is day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. Look at that spot in Japan before it disappears. It's still emanating from there, still hemorrhaging from there, still coming out of there. That never, ever changed. This is day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. Day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. Still doing it day after day after day. Still doing it. Still doing it day after day after day. Day after day. Day after day. Day after day. Still doing it day after day after day. Still doing it. Still doing it. Day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. doing it. Still doing it. Day after 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 day. Still doing it day after day after day after day after day after day. Still emanating from there, still hemorrhaging from there, still coming out of there. That never, ever changed.
Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority unveiled a new footage of Unit 3 at the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The nuclear power plant was devastated by a powerful earthquake and tsunami in March 2011. Last month, a panel of experts announced that more than one explosion may have occurred at the reactor. They say explosions could have occurred not only on the 5th floor, but also on the 4th. Radiation levels still remain lethal on the 4th floor of Unit 3, but officials managed to record this video from the 3rd floor. Light can come into the reactor as the outer wall has come off from the explosion. The wall of the reactor containment vessel can be seen in the back. Officials did not find major damage to the internal equipment.
All right, so they've been using helicopters to try to spray water. What do you make of that?
It's like using a squirt gun against a forest fire. I mean, it's pathetic. One helicopter can't even get close because of the high radiation levels. And firemen with water cannons, they can't even reach the distance because it's too radioactive.
All right, what about using sand and concrete as they did at Chernobyl?
That's the final option. I think right now the Japanese government should put the Air Force on alert. That's what Gorbachev did in '86, put the Red Air Force on alert, armed them with helicopters, borated water, sand, concrete, and dump 5,000 tons of concrete on the Chernobyl reactor, stopping the reaction.
Even at Chernobyl, the so-called sarcophagus, that's what they called it, it eventually cracked and leaked radiation into the atmosphere. I think it's still leaking, right?
It's still on. The core is still melting into the earth. But the main thing is to stop it, because if this thing has an uncontrolled release of radioactive fission products, we're going to lose a good chunk of northern Japan. Japan as a nation's integrity could actually be threatened. And that's why I think the main thing right now is to stop it. We can debate about secondary long-term effects later, but the main thing is to stop the bleeding.
And plutonium is actually created during the fission process. It's more dangerous than uranium.
That's right, and also realize that Unit 3 has MOX fuel containing plutonium. So we have this cocktail of very dangerous fission products, and at Chernobyl, about 25% of the core came out into people's backyard.
Yeah, plutonium has a 25,000-year half-life. I think uranium is, I looked it up, 700 million years half-life.
We're talking about the life of the solar system, 4 billion years for uranium-238. A meltdown is forever.
And the straw was contaminated to 500,000 disintegrations every second in a kilogram of straw. Now this is cesium, it's got a 30-year half-life. But 30 years from now, it's still going to be disintegrating at 250,000 disintegrations per second. And 30 years after that, at 125,000 disintegrations per second. That's what this term half-life means. In particular, due to the black rain. Clouds of radioactive particles, hot particles, depositing everywhere. but they need to know the magnitude of the problem they're facing in order to handle it correctly. Rather than limit the information, it's important that they limit the radiation. So beginning to call black rain.
And a great star burning like a torch fell from heaven and landed on a third of the rivers, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea, and had life, died.
The death of the Pacific to start, and this is very clear, we've lost the Pacific, and then everything else follows after. It's a snowball effect. What kind of country is this? What kind of world am I living in? Is there anybody out there with any integrity? Is there anybody on the planet that even cares anymore? Are you so lost in your little world that you're going to sit there and passively let these monsters, these animals, these despicable creatures wreck our planet and then hide it away? We're talking about an extinction event.
It's way worse than originally thought. But I'm telling you, the poison is here.
Fill the beach up with people, but you're still not going to find the species that are missing. You can fill that beach up, and we're not going to find those species.
Like, they're growing food, harvesting it right alongside the bags of radiation. Like, say if you brought these bags to the other end of Japan and done that and took the picture, it's still insidiously wrong. It's still horrifically, it's criminal, see? So if I went down to a nuclear dump and bought the land right alongside the fence of a nuclear dump, a well-known dump. You know, one of those Superfund sites. And I opened up a farm there, and I started showing pictures of me harvesting food right alongside the Superfund dump. Nobody would get upset. Nobody would have an issue with that. The government would be like, way to go, Dana! Score! Probably got that land pretty cheap, hey buddy? Yeah, that's right, Mr. Weirdo. Officials admit deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up. So pulling funding when you already admitted to a deadly meltdown cover-up is it's disrespectful, to say the least. It shows nothing but contempt for your friends and your family. We lied about the meltdown. It's a cover-up and a grave issue, an unprecedented nuclear disaster as bad as it gets, an unpardonable breach of trust.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4. At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So all the media pretending they're in the building is the equivalent of the Fukushima 50 law, where they talk about the story of courageous workers who remained on site to stabilize the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant during its meltdown. Stabilize during a meltdown. Look at it. Do you think someone's going to stabilize that one? Columbia medical professor inhaling just a single hot particle can cause a cancer. And of course, a cancer is the last one to manifest and diagnose. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, autoimmune deficiencies, and injuries will show up long before cancer is diagnosed. You can die because your immune system is so taxed, right? Because the radiation is in your body, creating all these white blood cells, displacing your red blood cells that carry oxygen and nutrition throughout your body. You displace that, and you have all these white blood cells fighting radiation because it's pulsing through your whole body. So even though the radiation is sequestered here, it's pulsing all the way up to here. So your white blood cells are being produced and hunting here, looking for the source of it, but also repairing the damage because it destroys the chromosomes and the DNA in every direction. This is what makes it so, this is why you have nuclear power, because there's so much energy. But it's only using about 3 to 5% of its resources, and then you have to put it in fuel pools because nuclear power is so inefficient. Nuclear power shouldn't exist. The only reason it created nuclear power was to make weapons. Japan Times, as the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will leak out about Fukushima. See, when you're harvesting food and shipping it worldwide right alongside the radiation, you lost control. That's a sign of mental illness. The person that's doing it, imagine how stupid that person actually is. Imagine how gullible or evil you have to be to do that. Imagine, like, it's a miracle that they can even get that thing to start up. Like how could you be so stupid to grow food there, and how did you get so stupid that you took that job? How does that work? Seriously. Fukushima rice to be exported to France. Why is that a headline? Well, because it's brutally dangerous. Fukushima sake shop opens in New York to make the sake out of the rice that nobody else will buy because it should have never been grown in the first place. You got any idea how insidious that headline is? That was November last year. They shipped the wine, the sake, that nobody would buy the rice. They made sake and shipped it to New York. The radiation forecast in Japan was kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. Might have had something to do with it. TEPCO is clearly just hanging on day by day. What did they do? They didn't call for MIT after a nuclear meltdown.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying. At that time,
send us people who don't mind dying.
You will recognize them by their fruits. It sounds crazy, but Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island show why nuclear is inherently safe.
Now there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies.
Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
Thought the levels of radiation from Fukushima were virtually undetectable on the west coast of the US. We can detect them but levels far below levels known to cause miserable harm to living things. People who tell you that the Pacific has been devastated by contamination from Fukushima really don't know what they are talking about. Now there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies. Then would love your opinion on 30 million on-ton bags piled up in Japan. Or was that an ill-conceived move? Watch less YouTube. Read more, talk to scientists with training in physics, chemistry and biology. Truth of the matter is that other environmental, for example air quality, and behavior choices, for example, drinking alcohol, represent much more proximate and significant threats to public health than ionizing radiation does in Tokyo and most everywhere else in Japan. Well done Springbok. Kinda sad when everyone is having a meltdown. When this is the meltdown people should be pissed about, carcinogenic seafood and all. Hashtag Fukushima, nonsense. The levels of radionuclides in Pacific fish from Fukushima are dwarfed by naturally occurring isotopes which account for virtually all of the ionizing radiation dose consumers experience. That dose is far below levels that cause measurable cancer risk. Hashtag science. View this morning on my way to talk about Fukushima and conspiracy theories. People who tell you that the Pacific has been devastated by contamination from Fukushima really don't know what they are talking about. To the naysayers, if you lived 150 miles away from 3 nuclear meltdowns, and you happen to have elevated levels of uranium in your body, that's not a coincidence. Again, your attacks against me are odd. Again, your pattern of blindly, arbitrarily accepting the testimony of individuals who make movies or comment online that you don't know is odd. Radiation sickness is easily diagnosed and requires high doses to manifest. Story is unlikely. Nuclear power plants are heating up the oceans. Fukushima climate change global warming. To about the same degree people swimming in it are. Our project's results and measurements made by the international scientific community indicate the release of radioisotopes from Fukushima will have no measurable impact on the health of the marine ecosystem in the Northeast Pacific nor on public health in North America. You're blocked. You can't follow or see at JT Cullen's tweets.
Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Then the third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star burning like a torch fell from heaven and landed on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. 11 The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter like wormwood oil, and many people died from the bitter waters. Became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter.
Radiation tests taking place by Greenpeace workers in Japan in areas where the Japanese government claims that it's been decontaminated and that people can move back in. And there are hotspots all over the place. The other problem with the whole Fukushima area is it's a myth that the government can go in and clean this up. You've got an active nuclear plant that is active fission, atom splitting. It's not likely to ever be recovered. When I say never recovered, you have 600 tons of melted fuel from the three reactors that had total 100% meltdown. And according to Greg Jesko, who was the former head of the U.S. NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, it's not likely they will ever recover that. And nobody knows where the fuel is. So this is something that's very radioactive, and it will be for decades. So this is one of the biggest cover-ups of our lifetime. It's one of the biggest industrial disasters of our lifetime. There are going to be a lot of people who suffer. And of course, another part of the cover-up, Alex, I've seen several articles in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, and Forbes, where these pro-nuke writers talk about, well, there are no deaths, maybe one death as a result of this meltdown. And they go on and on about how this really shows how safe nuclear power really is. Well, baloney. I have several contacts I know of in Japan who gainsay that. The mayor of Futaba, and I've written about this several times. In fact, I would recommend to your listeners that they read an article that I had published in September of 2015. The title of it is The Fukushima Fix. The Fukushima Fix. That is a very thorough article that goes into a lot of what we're talking about. But in terms of deaths in Japan, there have been many. The mayor of Futaba, which is one of the cities in the Fukushima area that was evacuated, actually made a public statement at one point that many people are dying and that his own government is lying about it. There's a Buddhist temple not too far from the Fukushima nuclear disaster. There's a monk there named Kinoshita, and he has cremated ashes, several ashes of workers from the Fukushima plant. And of course, what happens at the Fukushima plant is that TEPCO, which is Tokyo Electric Power Company, doesn't report deaths of workers. And they say there haven't been any. Well, the reason they do that is twofold. One is that they use subcontractors to do all the cleanup work. Well, the subcontractors are not obligated to report the deaths on behalf of TEPCO. Secondly, the second thing that happens is if you're a worker and if you've been zapped by way too much radiation, if you get radiation illness, do you think you're well enough to go to work before you die, to die at the work site? No, you're not. You're in bed suffering, and that's when you die, and they don't report it. A journalist, independent journalist in Japan named Meiko Ashidori, who I've had contact with, interviewed a nurse who resigned from TEPCO. And that nurse told her that there have been many, many deaths of workers at the plant that are not reported. So this is an ongoing disaster that is not going to quit during our lifetime. And it's going to have unbelievable impact for years and years. You know, Alex, in that article that you mentioned at the top of this show about my most recent, the Fukushima cover-up article, I intentionally put 2 paragraphs at the end of that article that I think will really ring a bell with people. And it talks about Chernobyl because, you know, Chernobyl happened 30 years ago. And I thought it was fascinating that the USA Today newspaper on April the 17th of this year had an article entitled Chernobyl's Legacy, Kids with Bodies Ravaged by Disaster. Kids with Bodies Ravaged by Disaster. And what they said in that article is that there are about 2.4 million people today in the Ukraine that they're registered with the health ministry to receive ongoing Chernobyl-related health care. And of those 2.5 million people, nearly 1.5 million, actually it's 453,000, are children, none of them born at the time of the accident. Their parents were children in 1986. And these children have a range of illnesses, respiratory, digestive, musculoskeletal, eye diseases, blood diseases, cancer, congenital malformations, all kinds of abnormalities.
And a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And a third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter or poisonous.
Going to kill the planet. This is killing the planet. Not going to kill the planet, it's killed the planet. It essentially already. The upper mammals, the way up the food chain, like us, are the last to go. We're the apex, the predators. The microscopic world is the first to go. The bacteria, the insects, the 4 million species in the ocean, Pacific Ocean, that you don't even conceive. You can't even wrap your mind around. Have paid the price already. The shorelines are full of emaciated whales and seals and sea lions and birds and mammals and animals. And so at what point will we admit we need to deal with a serious issue? We're talking about an extinction event. Will you fight for the planet? Will you fight for your own life? If someone's trying to attack you with a knife or a stick, are you just going to stand there and say, okay, go ahead? Are you gonna fight for your life? You can't wrap your mind around that there's more things on the planet than humans, that there's 8 million species here, and that we are the stewards, whether we like it or not. This is our obligation.
And if it does, if we end up with a molten core, and then you talk about the time for the concrete, to disassociate, it's that new rig says it's a couple inches an hour. And of course that Mark 1 containment is the worst one of all the containments we have, and it's literally, the new reg tells you that in a station blackout you're going to lose containment. There's no doubt about it.
They are looking for insights, guidance, recommendations from the NRC for all 4 spent fuel pools for the Daiichi site, Daiichi site, the CHI site. They believe Daiichi site, yep, the CHI one. Yep. Unit 1 and 2 is boiling down, and Unit 3 and 4 is having, Zerk water reaction. They believe there is essentially no walls on Unit 3. The explosion. I'm sorry. Unit 4. The explosion leveled the walls, leveled the structure for the Unit 4 spent fuel pool all the way down to the approximate level of the bottom of the fuel. So there's no water in there whatsoever.
This is going to progress to the point at which we probably have. I think have to assume at this point that we're going to have 3 reactors out of control and possibly up to 6 spent fuel pools. Agreed. I think we need to take whatever actions are necessary to deal with that. That is the message I think we need to deliver to the ambassador as soon as possible. If that involves the general evacuation of U.S. citizens, we need to instruct that to be done immediately. Does anyone disagree with that?
Once again, what do you see now as the worst scenario as far as what the impact could be on Japan?
At this point, I would see a worst scenario probably being 3 reactors eventually having, for lack of a better term, a meltdown. So the reactors would you would eventually breach primary containment and have some type of release. Again, it's difficult to predict the magnitude of that release, coupled with potentially up to 6 spent fuel pools in a degraded condition, possibly with spent fuel pool fires. Those are all significant events.
Yeah, it's progressed to at least 2 reactors, multiple spent fuel pools, and maybe 4 reactors and 4 spent fuel pools. So,
This is Bill. Let me interrupt for just 1 second because I want to make sure that I'm clear when I talk to the chairman. The change in power recommendations, I thought, was due to Chuck's understanding about the integrity of the Unit 4 spent fuel pool. Well, go ahead.
I think our understanding of the Unit 4 spent fuel pool is it has been destroyed on the side such that they will get no water above the bottom of the active fuel. In effect, the sides of the reactor building are gone. Whereas before the explosion went upwards and took the top, the pictures lead us to believe that the sides are gone.
Right, and so it's the new additional source term, which is the Unit 4 spent fuel pool, which is causing us to change our recommendation for protective action.
Now that's the worst one, the Unit 4, because it'll be like that maybe in the long term. The Unit 3 one currently, when we showed up here, they had the metal water reactions going, and the Unit 1s and 2s were boiling.
Yeah, Bill, this is Chuck. I think the other part of that was we've just not seen any mitigation of any of the events, and we would just take all the spent fuel pools and probably all the 4 reactors and to the final conclusion because we've not seen any mitigation.
Yeah.
So you've got to assume that it's going to go to the final.
Right. Okay. And I understand that. I couldn't understand the chairman's focus on Unit 2, unless I was misunderstanding what conversation was going on.
Bill, this is Charlie. I think what he
somebody did run a rascal on Unit 2.
Yeah, Bill, this is Jim Trapp. It's based on the rascal runs, and the rascal runs we had. Remember we had that worst case 2 days ago, and we had a couple rascal runs done, and what our rascal run said was worst case. Unit 4 fuel that was bounded by the Unit 2 meltdown with no fission product barriers. So that's why the chairman remembered that and was more focused on Unit 2.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that no one that takes anything he says as implying that if they resolve the issues with Unit 2, life is going to be a lot better.
No.
Right?
No. They got
right.
1, 3, and 4, and maybe this is likely to go to 4. Spent fuel pools lost, and
right. Okay, I got it.
Does that uncertainty change any of our views about the recommendations?
No, not the 50 miles.
Okay.
Organic Slant had put up a video, and he got the usual suspects, the trolls. In fact, he's been hammered by. This is Craig from. He uses this account to attack me and Kevin Blanche. But what he ends up doing is he sends a lot of people to my site and Kevin's site, right? And quite a lot of people, after seeing and listening to him, looked me up and ended up donating to me. So we thank Craig. Craig says no one died in Germany due to Chernobyl's radiation. Really. 600 pilots died, for starters. That's Harvard University. And so Organic Slant says, show someone who had died from Chernobyl. Looks like you can't show any deaths there either, can you? Organic Slant puts down Chernobyl heart. Can't wait for Quag war. Can't wait for Craig with NukeLiar denial syndrome. But I notice in some comments he don't reply when he's wrong. And he didn't reply to that. So Chernobyl heart. You go look up that documentary. Watch this lady. Now she is from a foundation contributing to there's just all these incredible amount of orphanages in Belarus and Ukraine of disfigured children. He's got no legs, or he's deformed, hands and legs rather. He said he carried me to school. He wants to be a doctor when he grows up. I would like to help kids, he says. You get all these disfigured children. Craig's like, no, nothing happened to him. There's something else happened to them. Chernobyl's Children Project in Ireland donates time and money to these victims. See this child here, totally disfigured. And the missus comes in, grabs him by the arm, just picks him up and tries to change his clothes. And the other lady there, that lady here, she almost had a heart attack. She was broken-hearted when she seen him. I'll show you some clips of it. So Craig's like, frig the children, they don't matter. Scum children, Craig says. And look at her. She grabs the child by the arm and picks the child up. Actually picks the child up. The lady tells her to put the child down. You can see now she's looking at the lady. This is really shocking, by the way. She's like, no, stop. Right, stop. Just stop. She's confused, right? And that's Elaine. She's retired from this. She can't do it no more. Such is life, eh? That's why I can't understand how anybody can keep up with this anyway, right? I do it because it's got to get done. Somebody got to keep the fire burning. And it's very discouraging to do the things I'm doing, right? It's very difficult to get any support. And you just run out of steam trying to be good. You just can't keep it up anymore. And so the lady here says he's never going to get any bigger. He's never going to grow up, as if to justify picking him up with one hand like he's a grocery bag or something. And then you got this baby Craig, born with a second head in Chernobyl. There's just endless orphanages like this, Craig. But Craig refuses. He's constantly spamming everybody's websites with saying there's nobody who got hurt, nobody died, nobody was ever injured. Here's what it is, right? I do these little presentations because tomorrow is coming at me full steam ahead with just nothing but horror stories again from the lawyers. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. And thank you, everybody that done the best you could.
Until the day of the accident, there were pro-nuclear people and anti-nuclear people. But the day of the accident, there were only people worried about their families, putting all their lifelong belongings into their cars and leaving. And that's the reality. That's the reality of nuclear power if there's an accident.
To discuss the situation in Japan, as well as his latest book, we're joined by Dr. Michio Kaku, a Japanese-American physicist, a best-selling author, professor of theoretical physics at City University of New York and the City College of New York. His brand new book is Physics of the Future, How Science Will Change Daily Life by 2100. Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to see you again.
Glad to be on the show, Amy.
So, talk about this raising of the category level to 7 on a par with Chernobyl.
Well, Tokyo Electric has been in denial, trying to downplay the full impact of this nuclear accident. However, there's a formula, a mathematical formula by which you can determine what level this accident is. This accident has already released something on the order of 50,000 trillion becquerels of radiation. You do the math. That puts it right smack in the middle of a level 7 nuclear accident. Still less than Chernobyl. However, radiation is continuing to leak out of the reactors. The situation is not stable at all. So you're looking at basically a ticking time bomb. It appears stable, but the slightest disturbance, a secondary earthquake, a pipe break, evacuation of the crew at Fukushima could set off a full-scale meltdown at 3 nuclear power stations, far beyond what we saw at Chernobyl.
Talk about exactly, I mean, as a physicist, to explain to people exactly what has taken place in Japan at these nuclear power plants.
Think of driving a car, and the car all of a sudden lunges out of control. You hit the brakes. The brakes don't work. That's because the earthquake wiped out the safety systems in the first minute of the earthquake and tsunami. Then your radiator starts to heat up and explodes. That's the hydrogen gas explosion. And then to make it worse, the gas tank is heating up, and all of a sudden your whole car is going to be in flames. That's the full-scale meltdown. So what do? You drive the car into a river. That's what the utility did by putting seawater from the Pacific Ocean in a desperate attempt to keep water on top of the core. But then seawater has salt in it, and that gums up your radiator. And so what do? You call out the local firemen. And so now you have these Japanese samurai warriors. They know that this is potentially a suicide mission. They're coming in with hose water, trying to keep water over the melted nuclear reactor cores. So that's the situation now. So when the utility says that things are stable, it's only stable in the sense that you're dangling from a cliff, hanging by your fingernails, and as the time goes by, each fingernail starts to crack. That's the situation now. And let's be blunt about this. Would you buy food that says made in Chernobyl? And the Japanese people are also saying, what, should I buy food that says made in Fukushima? We're talking about the collapse of the local economy. Just because the government tries to lowball all the numbers, downplay the severity of the accident, and that's making it much worse.
What do you think has to be done now? I mean, one of the biggest problems is secrecy, both with the Tokyo company that runs the plants and also the government, the constant downplaying from the beginning. And yet there are so many people who've been evacuated who are demanding compensation. There was just a major protest at TEPCO with the people in the area who've been evacuated, no jobs, no money, saying we demand compensation.
Well, TEPCO is like the little Dutch boy. All of a sudden we have cracks in the dike. You put a finger here, you put a finger there, and all of a sudden new leaks start to occur, and they're overwhelmed. I suggest that they be removed from leadership entirely and be put as consultants. An international team of top physicists and engineers should take over with the authority to use the Japanese military. I think the Japanese military is the only organization capable of bringing this raging accident under control, and that's what Gorbachev did in 1986. He saw this flaming booming nuclear power station in Chernobyl, he called out the Red Air Force. He called out helicopters, tanks, armored personnel carriers, and buried the Chernobyl reactor in 5,000 tons of cement, sand, and boric acid. That's, of course, a last-ditch effort, but I think the Japanese military should be called out.
To do?
Because of the fact that the radiation levels are so great, workers can only go in for perhaps 10 minutes, 15 minutes at a time, and they get their year's dose of radiation. You're there for 1 hour, and you have radiation sickness. You vomit, your white corpuscle count goes down, your hair falls out. You're there for a day, and you get a lethal amount of radiation. At Chernobyl, there were 600,000 people mobilized, each one going in for just a few minutes, dumping sand, concrete, boric acid onto the reactor site. Each one got a medal. That's what it took to bring one raging nuclear accident under control. And I think the utility here is simply outclassed and overwhelmed. And the people there are wondering, what's going on with the government? I mean, why aren't they telling us the truth? Radiation levels are now rising 25 miles from the site, far beyond the evacuation zone. And remember that we could see an increase in leukemia. We could see an increase in thyroid cancers. That's the inevitable consequence of releasing enormous quantities of iodine into the environment.
What has to happen to the plant ultimately?
Well, in the best case scenario, this is the scenario devised by the utility itself, they hope to bring it under control by the end of this year. By the end of this year, they hope to have the pumps working and the reaction is finally stabilized by the end of this year.
Oddly, it's sounding a little bit like BP when they were trying to plug up the hole.
Right.
It will happen, it will happen.
They're literally making it up as they go along. We're in totally uncharted territories. You get any nuclear engineering book, look at the last chapter, and this scenario is not contained in the last chapter of any nuclear engineering textbook on the planet Earth. So they're making it up as they go along. And we are the guinea pigs for this science experiment that's taking place. Then it could take up to 10 years to finally dismantle the reactor. The last stage is entombment. This is now the official recommendation of Toshiba, that they entomb the reactor over a period of many years, similar to what happened in Chernobyl.
Entomb it in?
In a gigantic slab of concrete. You're going to have to drill underneath to make sure that the core does not melt right into the ground table. And you're going to put 5,000 tons of concrete and sand on top of the flaming reactor.
Should people be concerned about any food that says from Japan?
Not from Japan, but remember in the area, the sea, we're talking about levels that are millions of times beyond legal levels found right there.
In the last 2 weeks, everything we knew about that accident has been turned upside down. We were told 3 partial meltdowns, don't worry about it. Now we know it was 100% core melt in all 3 reactors. Radiation, minimal that was released. Now we know it was comparable to the radiation at Chernobyl. So all the mythology of the accident has been turned upside down because utility has finally fessed up to how severe this accident really was.
In your view, did they not know how bad it was, or they knew and they didn't tell, or they just were completely blown away by the scope of the disaster?
I'm a physicist, and we tried to reconstruct the accident in our computers given the feeble amount of information they gave us. We knew it was much more severe than they were saying because radiation was coming out left and right. So, in other words, they lied to us. They knew how much radiation was coming out. They knew the danger. They knew how much core melting was taking place, but they tried to put a happy face on it.
As a reporter, within hours of the earthquake and tsunami, within hours, not even a day, there were already statements from the company and from the International Atomic Energy Association saying that there had been safe shutdown of all of the reactors. And we know, of course, in the end that simply wasn't true. But from the very beginning, they were trying to tell us that this was a safe situation.
Within hours of the accident, we now know it was like the Keystone Cops. People that are clueless, headless, just running around crazy, not knowing what to do.
This will be the 100-year cleanup. How long will it take to clean this up, in your view?
50 to 100 years.
And we're not there yet. We're not to the point of talking about the cleanup yet because they haven't stopped the reaction. It's still happening.
Cleanup hasn't even started yet. They're not in cold shutdown till next year. Cold shutdown is when boiling stops.
Right.
It's boiling water right there at the reactor, releasing radiation into the environment and releasing radiation into gigantic vats.
How are they storing and disposing of this stuff?
That's the killer, because they have all these vats that are filling up now. They may have to dump it into the ocean again. At that point, the Chinese, the Koreans, the fishermen, they get up all in arms because there's so much damage that every time you put water in, it leaks right out again, highly radioactive, and it's filling up at the site now.
So what do they do with it?
Right now, they're just counting the number of gallons as they pile up, desperately trying to bring more vats in. But once they saturate, they're going to have to dump. And at that point, it's another crisis. This could be the granddaddy of all industrial accidents, topping Chernobyl at 200 billion. Topping the Gulf oil spill at about 15 billion, topping the Challenger Columbia disasters in space at about 10 billion. This could be the world's record holder for an industrial accident.
Downplaying the risks, and you begin to wonder, I mean, is Homer Simpson operating this nuclear power plant?
Sorry, NHK is reporting white smoke seen at nuclear reactor. Is it number 1 or number 3? I'm being told that white smoke rising from a blast was heard at reactor number 3, smoke rising from reactor number 1. We have Jim Walsh, our nuclear expert, CNN contributor, standing by. Jim, what does this tell you? What does this tell you, Jim?
Well, as soon as you started to say that, Cooper, I said unit number 3. The government had been earlier concerned that hydrogen was building up. Remember, at unit 1, we had an explosion. It turned out that explosion did not compromise the core facility, but the same process. What we're seeing, it's deja vu all over again. We lose a cooling pump. We have problems at one reactor. The hydrogen builds up. Then it explodes. That happened at Unit 1. Apparently now that's happened at Unit 3, and we're going to have to assess how significant the damage is. Hopefully, it's just the outer structure, the concrete of the building itself, and has left unaffected the reactor and unaffected the containment vessel, because if it were to affect those things, that would be bad news. And by the way, they're actively trying to pump seawater into that unit number 3 in order to cool it down. And so we're going to have to wait and see whether that's going to affect that process, and that would certainly be unwelcome.
Jim, just hold on. I want to ask you a bunch of questions, but first I just want to ask my crew some questions. How far are we from Fukushima? North or? Okay, which way is the wind blowing? West. All right. I'm just concerned, Jim, if there's an event like this, you now have an evacuation zone around Fukushima of 20 kilometers, which is 12 miles. We're about 100 kilometers to the north of this reactor. Do you expect Japanese authorities to be expanding the evacuation zone?
It all depends on the particulars of this explosion. If this explosion,
should I get out of here?
Yeah, I hear you, Anderson. And of course, I want to err on the side of caution for you here. My guess is that you're okay, but I don't want you to sue me if I'm wrong. Yeah. But I'm inclined to think that you're okay, insofar as the government authorities had warned earlier that hydrogen was building up and that there might be problems with that. And so the most likely scenario is this is similar to what we saw yesterday. And if that's the case, then you should be fine. But, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty here, and we're not going to know for a little while.
There have been releases of, I guess, a gas, and correct me, I flunked science. So there had been releases yesterday, I think it was, and they had said that because of the way the wind was blowing, basically whatever was released went out over the ocean. What was released? Why were they doing those kind of controlled releases? If you could explain that to our viewers.
Sure. What happened is it's getting very hot inside that reactor core because they're not able to cool it down. And there's water, the water that's already inside there is getting boiled, and that as it boils, it turns to steam and to vapor, and then the pressure begins to build up inside the reactor. Well, you don't want that pressure to build and build and build and then cause some sort of problem, cracks or some large, melting of the nuclear material. So, it's not the best choice, but compared to the alternatives, the choice is to release some of that vapor, which is mildly radioactive. It's not the same thing as what might be released if there was an actual full-blown meltdown. It's mildly radioactive, and they're also able to screen it. In some circumstances, they're able to screen it so that they can pull out some of the radioactive material that is being released. But in any case, they release it into the atmosphere, and then hopefully it blows out to sea, but it's not going to be a major health threat. It's not welcome. You don't want to do that, but it's not going to be a major health threat, and it's certainly far better than letting the pressure build and build and build until something much worse happens.
We'll be watching to see if Japanese authorities do start to expand that evacuation zone. There's also been a lot of talk about Japanese authorities handing out iodine pills. I've yet to see that happen. We haven't had any, and we've yet to see that actually occurring around this area. But again, this is a situation, a fast-moving situation.
They're going to plan it as a car accident and it's bleeding out on the side of the road. And if we don't do something, we got no one to blame but ourselves because we're capable of trying. How can we not try? You can do that all you want, but that doesn't...
Radiation alert. A nuclear scientist tells us the cleanup at Japan's Fukushima plant could take 100 years.
Society has no concept of life. Life is not something you'll find in your living room or in your garage. Life is something everybody has access to. It's something you can't buy. It's something that can't be taken away with a piece of paper. The essence of life. So humans, the species, we contemplate life, but there's 8 million species on this planet we couldn't care less about. We tried to race into space, but we haven't even explored 2% of our oceans. We conquer, but we don't understand what life is. We take it for granted. We feel an entitlement, but we also have an essence about us, and you can disrupt somebody's essence with propaganda or chemicals or abuse or neglect. But it's like a flower that blooms, and life can bloom in even the most wicked, even the most degenerate, and even the most lost. Life and peace is something that we don't seem to worry about. We worry about Hollywood movies and gadgets and toys. And I just don't think sometimes that reality will ever sit in. And I know that don't make any sense to anybody. But as I explain it, the rest of this, it might make some sense to you. So we're going to lose this planet for sure. It's not a maybe. It's not an if. And it's not long away. It just doesn't even seem like it's real. Fukushima was a fatal blow. It defies any kind of rationale, any kind of logic, any kind of trying to absorb it. The children are radioactive, so it's all over. That's over. It's already over. We just won't accept it, I guess. Humans are plagues on the earth. Newspapers, Fukushima problems causing concern in U.S. as the radionuclides cross the Pacific. The EPA said no comment on the projections. It's unbelievable betrayal of the radioactive plume hitting the West Coast. The California residents had, and many people, so many people were already aware, so many people, that they just hit it is all they done. Fission is unique to the planet Earth, to the human species. The other planets have fusion. They don't use fission because fission... so the sun creates the atoms, the elements, and the human species destroys it and mutates the indigenous to the solar system elements and turn them into something that nothing in the solar system has a autoimmune response for. And because otherwise the 8 million species have no hope. And if we help them by proxy, we help ourselves, right? Humanity as a whole has literally never experienced something like Fukushima. We'll be fighting the radiation on the order of tens of hundreds of years. We won't be around that long. We're going to wipe out the entire ecosystem in short order. If I wanted to dream up a fictional nightmare scenario for radioactive fallout, this is what you're looking at. Say, if I was going to, like a fiction writer, I was going to say, 55 is an evacuation zone, 220 million, that'd be a great movie. That'd be like all kinds of drama. But see, you can't see it coming at you. This is per liter of rainwater. But it didn't stop coming out. When you look at the models, you got to appreciate it didn't stop coming out. It's still coming out. It's still hemorrhaging either into the ocean and also up into the environment. And because you only need such a tiny amount of something that's not supposed to be on the planet, that has no right to exist. Before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram is stored on a nuclear waste site forever. After, they want you to eat it. It's just a handful of people, of demons. Actual, true, real-life demons. Watch how... See Japan? Don't take your eyes off Japan. Keep looking at Japan. Look at that spot up there where it's emanating from. Look at it. Keep looking at it. This is day after day after day after day after day. It's still doing it day after day after day. Look at that spot in Japan before it disappears. It's still emanating from there, still hemorrhaging from there, still coming out of there. That never, ever changed, okay? Radiation checks of food in Japan are only 1% of what the Belarus checked. So it shows you this complete disregard for all life, not just humans. So there's no such thing as a benefit from a nuclear power plant. Everybody equates it with millisieverts. That's not how you count it. You count it in atomic decays. Because it only takes one atom sequestering in your muscles, your organs, or your bones to give you an illness, a disease, an autoimmune deficiency, an injury like heart or liver or lung or respiratories or pituitary or adrenaline or Alzheimer's or dementia or autism or diabetes. There's around 1,800 known diseases. Humanity is an unsustainable danger to the Earth's ecosystem. Your future and the entire ecosystem and society and the 8 million species depend upon you trying to use your brain for a few minutes. That's terrible. You can't trust the system, right? Yeah, hi. Dana Durnford's calling. I've done expeditions along your coastline, and I noticed all the species are missing. I say I was up on your coastline looking for species, for insects and birds, tidal zones, all the species are missing. Just hang on a second. Yeah, I went up and done expeditions on your coastline, 260 days, 15,000 miles of the Canadian coastline. I noticed all your species were missing in your tidal zones. All your algae were missing, 700 algae, 78 species of sea anemones, we only found a couple, 70 species of sponges, we only found a few. The list goes on and on and on. All the species are missing. Yeah, what's going on? How come you're not telling people? Yeah, go ahead, sure. Okay. Okay. Alrighty, good stuff, thank you. Is he there right now? Is he there right now? We're wondering where all the species are. We're very upset with your latest headlines. We're thinking about coming up there and setting up a protest for the next couple of months in front of your office. Not thinking about it, we're actually going to be doing that. We're extremely upset that you people are lying to everybody in British Columbia, particularly to the Haida. And what gives you the right to do that? Why? I thought you were journalists. How hard is it for you to walk down to your shoreline and find the species? Exactly, specifically, when they're well documented through all institutions. It's just shocking. It's revolting. It's despicable. It's disgusting. It's maniacal that you're sitting there telling British Columbians that everything is normal. The arrogance, that hubris, that pompous. Everything is gone. You're telling them it's okay? It's unacceptable. We're not going to sit here and put up with it. I'm telling you right now, it's disgusting. I'm enraged. What kind of country is this? What kind of world am I living in? Is there anybody out there with any integrity? Is there anybody on the planet that even cares anymore? Are you so lost in your little world that you're going to sit there and passively let these monsters, these animals, these despicable creatures wreck our planet and then hide it away? It's unbelievable that I got to come out here and do what I got to do because nobody else will do it. And even your own media, your despicable media, your disgusting, maniacal, twisted, heartless, spineless media cannot even walk down to the beach and do a species count. How is that possible? Where did we lose that part of humanity? Where is humanity? Why doesn't humanity exist anymore? What I'm doing right now, for any specific reason, only because of factual information and because of pure outrage, pure distress that you're being murdered and deceived and manipulated and lied to and treated as idiots and stomped and spit upon by the very institutions that you think is there to help you or protect you or inform you. Is the betrayal is beyond comprehension. The betrayal is unimaginable. The time for pretending is over. There is no guessing about the lethality of these isotopes and how long they take to affect you, and the autoimmune deficiencies, illnesses, and diseases that show up long before the cancer, and how devastating they are to you and your friends and your families and your loved ones and your communities, your pets, your animals, your ecosystem. It is time for you to grow up. It's time for you to gut up. It's time for you to man up. It's time for you to be somebody. It's time for you to help each other. It's time for you to band together. It's time for you to protect your own, because they're not going to protect you. It's time for you to make that stand. It's time for you to take those responsibilities. It's time for you to take care of your own business. And these people are trying to murder you. It's time to take care of your business. You better take care of it because they will destroy you. They will wreck your hopes, your dreams in a heartbeat for one paycheck. You better believe it. There's the proof. Go read their fucking story. These are monsters.
Computer images show the radioactive material was lifted 5,000 meters into the air. It was then carried by westerly winds and spread over the Pacific Ocean. The images indicate that on the fourth day after being vented, the substances reached the west coast of the United States, and on the seventh day, they approached Iceland after crossing the Atlantic.
The scope of Japan's nuclear disaster could change in an instant with a big shift in the winds. CNN meteorologist Chad Myers is keeping tabs on the weather in the disaster zone. Let me just ask you first, Chad, we just heard the president saying that in fact no U.S. territory is in danger, and neither is the U.S. coastline. Is there another place other than Japan that is in danger given the prevailing winds?
Given the prevailing winds now, no, because of the way the winds will disperse the radiation. Plus, by the time it makes landfall anywhere, 3 or 4 days even for Russia, that most of the radiation the isotopes would have degraded to something non-radiational. There'd just be things flying around the atmosphere. I want to take you to a couple of things, Candy. We'll step back a little bit. This is a model that will show you where the wind will go. Take you right here to where the wind has been. And in fact, the wind blowing off the country, off the shore of Japan, affected the water drops. I was watching the water drops live here from an NHK feed, and the wind was literally blowing that water that they were trying to put on this little reactor, just blowing it in the wind. And that was the wind that we saw last night, and we still see on this satellite picture now. That wind will change, and it will change from offshore to very close to deep from the south to the north, and that would move this radiation plume. We know there is one, it's just not big enough to make it to the U.S. It could move it up towards Sunday in the next couple of days. The winds will not be offshore anymore by Saturday. They will be pointing at the northern part of the island of Honshu. Now back to this graphic, because there was a lot of cutting and pasting going on today about a graphic that made its way around the internet about how this plume of radiation was going to make its way to California tonight and tomorrow. That was a theoretical model that was put out just for informational purposes about a plume that didn't even exist. And that's what the text said. But if you just cut and pasted the picture, everybody freaked out because it looked like a bunch of radiation was coming to the U.S. today. That didn't happen, and it's not going to happen. Even if some radiation was immediately emitted right now, it would work its way through the Aleutian Islands, back up toward Russia, and then probably up toward the Pacific Northwest. By the time, 5 days later, by the time it would even get close to any U.S. landfall, all the radiation would literally be dispersed. Candy?
So as I understand what you're saying, Chad, the president's perfectly right that there's no reason to believe any U.S. territory, much less the U.S. coastline, is threatened by anything that might come our way. But the city of Sendai, if the winds switch, gets hit with yet another disaster.
No question about that is the possibility coming up for Friday and Saturday for that city. 1 million people in that city. I know we talk about how much damage and destruction was done by the tsunami. Not the city of Sendai. Sendai is just fine. 1 million people there, the big skyscrapers there. The coastline to the east of that city, that's what was devastated by the tsunami. The people are still living in Sendai. If the wind shifts and that radiation goes there may be a completely new evacuation plan for that city, or at least an evacuation in place. Stay inside your house, don't go out at all. And that's outside that barrier, outside that window, that radius that they've drawn right now.
Sione, Japanese officials are now talking about fighting 2 partial meltdowns in nuclear reactors. Briefly, what's going on and potentially how dangerous?
This is an unprecedented crisis. It is extremely serious. One of the reactors has had half their core exposed already. This is the one they're now flooding with seawater in a desperate effort to prevent it from a complete meltdown. They also have lost control of a second reactor right next to it that is a partial meltdown, and there actually is a third reactor at a related site about 20 kilometers away that they've also lost control over. So you have multiple reactor crises at the same time. We've never had a situation like this
and
before.
What does it mean if you have a meltdown of a nuclear core?
The worst case scenario is that the fuel rods fuse together. The temperatures get so hot that they melt together into a radioactive molten mass that bursts through the containment mechanisms and is exposed to the outside. So they spew radioactivity into the ground, into the air, into the water. Some of that radioactivity could carry in the atmosphere to the west coast of the United States.
Really? I mean, thousands of miles across the Pacific.
Oh, absolutely. In Chernobyl, which happened about 25 years ago, the radioactivity spread around the entire northern hemisphere. It depends how many of these cores melt down and how successful they are on containing it once this disaster happens.
Now, you talk about the possibility of a huge exposure. The Japanese officials so far have evacuated people 12 miles from these plants. Is that far enough?
Not under a meltdown scenario, and you've seen these evacuation radiuses extend as the crisis has developed. First it was 2, then it was 6, now it's 12. We're told by some reporters on the ground that actually 50 kilometers out they're being blocked from access. So the effective evacuation area is actually larger than the official one that's been declared.
Put this in context. Japanese officials had been rating this as a 4 on a scale that I didn't even know existed, of 1 to 7 for nuclear events. How does the situation in Japan, as it now stands, compare to 3 Mile Island in this country in 1979 and Chernobyl that you mentioned in Russia in 1986?
If it were to stop right now, 4 might be a fair categorization of this, a local event without significant injury. But if it continues, it will certainly get to 5, which is the 3 Mile Island category of a serious event. We almost lost 3 Mile Island. It almost went meltdown. It stopped at the last minute. That's the situation we're fighting to maintain here in Japan. If there actually is a meltdown, that puts it into a 6, even a 7. That's the Chernobyl category, a serious nuclear incident with potential for large-scale loss of life.
So what are we talking about? 12 hours, 24, 48 hours? And what are the keys as to whether this becomes just a serious accident or a catastrophe?
We're in the key period right now, so the next 12 to 24 hours will tell us whether the Japanese officials are able to get control back over these reactors or it's gone, it's lost.
It starts at the Takasaki radionuclide station, around 200 kilometers away from the troubled plant. Within 4 days, the dispersion of minuscule amounts of radioactive isotopes were detected in eastern Russia and then travelled to the west coast of the United States. Traces from the accident in Fukushima were detectable all across the northern hemisphere, where it remained with the equator initially acting as a dividing line between the northern and southern air masses. But in a little over a month, traces from the release had reached the southern hemisphere.
Radiation plumes from Japan will reach the U.S. West Coast tomorrow, have alarmed many Americans. Chad Myers is with us now. So, Chad, experts are telling us that there is no cause for alarm or panic, right?
Well, yeah, that's correct. And you want to know why?
Tell us why.
Because all of the graphics and all the animations you've been seeing in other places online that show this plume of radiation reaching the West Coast is part of a computer model that was run this week for a plume of radiation that escaped from Japan on Saturday. The only problem is there wasn't a plume. So all of this talk about this plume is coming to the United States is all debunked because there is no plume. There's no radiation in the air.
And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And a third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter or poisonous. But I'm telling you, the poison is here. The implications for human health is disastrous. It's way worse than originally thought.
They're literally making it up as they go along. We're in totally uncharted territories. You get any nuclear engineering book, look at the last chapter, and this scenario is not contained in the last chapter of any nuclear engineering textbook on the planet Earth. So they're making it up as they go along, and we are the guinea pigs for this science experiment that's taking place.
Because there is no plume. There's no radiation in the air.
There are essentially 4 reactors that we are currently monitoring as best we can. They are all at the Fukushima #1 site. 3 of those reactors were operating at the time of the earthquake and were shut down following their normal procedures. We believe that in general for these 3 reactors, they have suffered some degree of core damage from insufficient cooling caused ultimately by the loss of off-site power and the inability of the on-site diesel generators to operate successfully following the tsunami. We also believe that for these 3 reactors that seawater is being injected with reported stable cooling. The primary containment is described as functional. I would also note that for unit number 2, we believe that the spent fuel pool level is decreasing. For unit number 3, we believe that the spent fuel pool integrity has been compromised and that there has perhaps been a Zerk-water interaction. Now, in addition to the 3 reactors that were operating at the time of the incident, a 4th reactor is also right now under concern. This reactor was shut down at the time of the earthquake. What we believe at this time is that there has been a hydrogen explosion in this unit due to an uncovering of the fuel in the fuel pool. We believe that secondary containment has been destroyed, and there is no water in the spent fuel pool. And we believe that radiation levels are extremely high, which could possibly impact the ability to take corrective measures. Recently, the NRC made a recommendation that based on the available information that we have, that for a comparable situation in the United States, we would recommend an evacuation to a much larger radius than has currently been provided in Japan. As a result of this recommendation, the ambassador in Japan has issued a statement to American citizens that we believe it is appropriate to evacuate to a larger distance, up to approximately 50 miles.
This whole world has no idea how much trouble it's in because of the nuclear industry. We see the death of the Pacific, and fish do not get cancer per se. They don't live long enough. Cancer takes 10-20 years to show up in humans, the same with animals or the same with any other species, for the most part. Leukemias, in cases close to nuclear plants, will show up quicker. Breast cancer shows up quick around nuclear power plants, 6 times more breast cancer. And so when you have a big release, incredible, unbelievable amount of releases, then you stand a chance of contaminating many places.
Some may have concerns about Fukushima. let me assure you, the situation is under control. It has never done and will never do any damage to Tokyo.
And to hide away from the truth and hope that it solves itself is not. It might have done it every other time, but it ain't gonna solve itself this time. Fukushima. This is a nightmare. No matter how you think about it, how you try to wrap your mind around it.
Cesium is water soluble and quickly makes its way into soils and waters. It's the same atomic family as potassium, and it mimics it, acting as a macronutrient. It quickly becomes ubiquitous in contaminated ecosystems. It is distributed by the catastrophic accidents at nuclear power plants because large quantities of volatile radioactive cesium build up inside the fuel rods of nuclear reactors. Thus, any accident at a nuclear reactor that causes the fuel rods to rupture, melt, or burn will cause the release of radioactive cesium gas. Long-lived radionuclides, such as cesium-137, are something new to us as a species. They did not exist on Earth in any appreciable quantities during the entire evolution of complex life.
Health professionals in northeastern Japan are suspicious about a trend they're seeing after the nuclear accident there 2 years ago. The normal incidence rate of thyroid cancer in children is 1 in hundreds of thousands. But 18 children in Fukushima Prefecture have been diagnosed among a population of about 2 million. A panel is examining the impact of radiation on residents. Health professionals are giving checkups to all 360,000 children aged 18 or younger at the time of the accident at Fukushima Daiichi. Radioactive substances released in the accident can accumulate in children's thyroid glands, possibly increasing their risk of developing cancer. Health professionals had tested 210,000 children by the end of July. On top of the 18 minors they diagnosed, they suspect 25 others may have the illness. Members of the panel say they can't determine if the accident has affected the rate of cancer among children. They've decided to set up a team of experts to look into the situation.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster. It was in here where there was that massive hydrogen explosion that severely damaged the building. But this was the least damaged of the 4 reactors because it was under maintenance and it wasn't actually operating. Well, now 2.5 years later, TEPCO says it's reached a milestone. That massive crane behind me is successfully moving 1,500 fuel rods in that cooling pool to a storage pool next door. Well, it's a slow and delicate process that will take about a year, but once finished, it will mean that this reactor can be decommissioned. Well, attention will then turn to reactors 1, 2 and 3 that suffered far worse damage. The situation there is serious and levels of radiation are dangerously high. Well, workers have begun removing debris, but the cleanup inside the reactors is a long way off. Officials here say the entire plant won't be decommissioned for at least 40 years. Well, as for the future of nuclear power in Japan, no one really knows. More than 50 reactors have been shut down, with the public very concerned about their health and safety. But Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is pushing to reopen them, believing that Japan can have a safe nuclear future. Anna Koren, CNN, Fukushima, Japan.
He certainly wasn't forced into it, but he was challenged by the journalists repeatedly during these very long press conferences. They can last about 5 hours, to prove that what he was saying was true, that this decontaminated water was safe. And that's why he says he chose to drink it in front of the journalists, to very publicly put on display his faith in the decontamination process. Now, this water is from essentially a radioactive puddle inside the Fukushima nuclear plant. Lots and lots of water accumulated there as the reactors were hosed down. Now, much of it has been decontaminated since, and it's being used for tasks around the power station, things like watering plants. And what Mr. Sonoda was being challenged challenged on was whether that practice was safe. So even though this water is not for human consumption normally at the plant, he decided he was going to drink it.
They'll be calling you a radical. You're not going to believe this one. You will love this one. This is our great activist up in Oregon, Tim, who he works it every day, hardcore. You know, his organs asleep. They're worse than New York, sleepwalking. They're hypnotized. You call the Sea Lion Rescue Foundation. There's a recording. Call it. It says simply, we are no longer rescuing. Just let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. This is not nature. This is the most unnatural thing in the history of the planet. Hello, the greatest ecological catastrophe in human fucking history is ongoing. The fucking greatest ecosystem on the planet, the Pacific Ocean, is being mass murdered right in front of your fucking eyes. And no one gives a fuck. I'll give a fuck. You know, they shiny balled you. Get your fucking gold. Jesus died so I could be rich. Buy your fucking guns and happily ever after. No, you're not. I cannot believe it. This is the greatest fucking denial in human history.
The Japanese are beginning to call black rain. The Japanese are beginning to call black rain.
Because I heard that the rain is radioactive and that if it touches your skin, I will get some kind of skin disease.
And now, Brian, we've seen precipitation in the background of a lot of our correspondents reporting today. Snow, rain. What does that do when there's radiation in the air? Apparently, we have lost communications with Brian Norcross at the Weather Channel. Brian, we'll catch you later if we can. Thank you very much.
On the other hand, Fukushima may be continuing to release radiation for a long time. For a long time. in particular due to the black rain. Now, black rain is not a term I'm sure he uses lightly, but it clearly was experienced in Japan after the accident. What he's referring to there is clouds of radioactive particles, hot particles, depositing everywhere. The Japanese are beginning to call black rain. Contaminated to 500,000 disintegrations every second in a kilogram of straw. Now this is cesium, it's got a 30-year half-life. But 30 years from now, it's still going to be disintegrating at 250,000 disintegrations per second. And 30 years after that, at 125,000 disintegrations per second. That's what this term half-life means. This contamination then has spread beyond the Fukushima prefecture, yet the prefecture itself seems to be the only place that the Japanese are worried about this radioactive exposure.
Processes by which water circulates between the Earth's oceans, atmosphere, and land, involving precipitation as rain and snow, drainage in streams and rivers, and return to the atmosphere by evaporation and transpiration.
We've also detected isotopes of iodine and cesium in the area around the Fukushima explosion. These are much heavier isotopes, and that means that if they get into the human body or if they get into the soil or the water supply, they can cause long-term radiation poisoning.
And that's what it's kicking out. An analogy that this is like removing a cigarette from a crushed pack.
Take that analogy, TEPCO engineer Masayuki Ono told us, and imagine that it's like the cigarette in that box is lit.
So you're saying it's even more difficult than that?
I think so. Ono told us they've removed 15% of the fuel from reactor 4, but it will be far more difficult to retrieve fuel from 3 other reactors that melted down. Those are so radioactive that the technology to dismantle them does not exist yet. TEPCO injects hundreds of tons of water daily into the reactors to keep them cool. But groundwater is pouring into the damaged reactors and has to be pumped out and stored.
They can't build these tanks fast enough. An additional 400 tons of contaminated water needs to be stored every day. That's as much water as the average American household uses in a year.
And now, Brian, we've seen precipitation in the background of a lot of our correspondents reporting today. Snow, rain. What does that do when there's radiation in the air? Apparently, we have lost communications with Brian Norcross at the Weather Channel. Brian, we'll catch you later if we can. Thank you very much.
Authorities in Japan are set to release water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea, despite reports that the water is still highly radioactive after many attempts to decontaminate it. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Despite reports, treated water at the Fukushima nuclear plant needed to be decontaminated even more before it can be released into the sea, the Japan government has decided to release it anyway. The Japan-based newspaper Mainichi Shimbun reports that Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority chief told reporters recently that the authority plans to release the water once the radiation levels are lower. However, he added the authority doesn't think more distillation or dilution will help, nor does he think it's necessary. Almost 85% of the water is said to contain dangerously high levels of radioactive materials. According to the plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, about 161,000 tons of the treated water is 10 to 100 times over the limit for release into the environment, and another 65,000 tons is up to 20,000 times the limit. The release option faced heavy criticism at town meetings in Fukushima and Tokyo in August, when TEPCO and the Japanese government officials provided little explanation about the contamination. TEPCO says it has the capacity to store up to 1.37 million tons of water through 2020, and it cannot stay at the plant forever. South Korea expressed its concerns over Japan's decision last week.
The ocean is not the property of one country but a shared resource of the world. Releasing contaminated water into the sea is likely to have a significant impact on the marine environment and the safety of marine products.
Some experts say the water can be stored for decades, but others say the tanks take up too much space and could interfere with ongoing decommissioning work, which the Japanese government hopes to finish before the 2020 Tokyo Summer Olympics.
For many of those who were exposed to them, there will be major health consequences. However, there are some radioactive elements that will not rapidly disappear, and it is these long-lived radionuclides that will remain to negatively affect the health of all complex life forms that are exposed to them. Chief among them is cesium-137, which has taken on special significance because it's proven to be the most abundant of the long-lived radionuclides that has remained in the environment following the nuclear disasters at Chernobyl and Fukushima. It has a 30-year radioactive half-life, which is why it persists in the environment. Scientists now believe that it will be 180 to 320 years before the cesium-137 around the destroyed Chernobyl reactor actually disappears from the environment. Cesium is water-soluble and quickly makes its way into soils and waters. It is the same atomic family as potassium, and it mimics it, acting as a macronutrient. It quickly becomes ubiquitous in contaminated ecosystems. It is distributed by the catastrophic accidents at nuclear power plants because large quantities of volatile radioactive cesium build up inside the fuel rods of nuclear reactors. Thus, any accident at a nuclear reactor that causes the fuel rods to rupture, melt, or burn will cause the release of radioactive cesium gas. Long-lived radionuclides, such as cesium-137, are something new to us as a species. They did not exist on Earth in any appreciable quantities during the entire evolution of complex life. Although they are invisible to our senses, they are millions of times more poisonous than most of the common poisons we are familiar with. Because cancer, leukemia, genetic mutations, birth defects, malformations, and abortions at concentrations almost below human recognition and comprehension. They are lethal at the atomic or molecular level. They emit radiation, invisible forms of matter and energy that we might compare to fire, because radiation burns and destroys human tissue. But unlike the fire of fossil fuels, the nuclear fire that issues forth from radioactive elements cannot be extinguished. It is not a fire that can be scattered or suffocated, because it burns at the atomic level. It comes from the disintegration of single atoms. Thus, radioactivity is a term which indicates how many radioactive atoms are disintegrating in a time period. We measure the intensity of radioactivity by the rate of disintegrations and the energy they produce. 1 becquerel is equal to 1 atomic disintegration per second. 1 curie is defined as that amount of any radioactive material that will decay at a rate of 37 billion disintegrations per second. So 1 curie equals 37 billion becquerels. Sometimes these man-made radionuclides are compared to naturally occurring radionuclides, such as potassium-40, which is always found in bananas and other fruits. However, this is a false comparison, since naturally occurring radioactive elements are very weakly radioactive. In the charts from the labs that are in green up there, the radioactivity is described as a specific activity. Note that potassium-40 has a specific activity of 71 10-millionths of a curie per gram. Compare that to the 88 curies per gram for cesium-137. It's like comparing a stick of dynamite to an atomic bomb. Highly radioactive fission products such as cesium-137 and strontium-90 emit 10 to 20 million times more radiation per unit volume than does potassium-40. So which one of these would you rather have in your bananas?
This next item made a lot of U.S. consumers sit up and take notice today. Bluefin tuna caught off the California coast have been found to contain elevated levels of radioactive matter dating back to the Japanese earthquake and tsunami that led to that nuclear accident at the Fukushima power plant. Our report tonight from NBC's Miguel Almaguer.
Today at the San Pedro Fish Market in Southern California, Dan Cadota inspects the catch of the day and stressed his fish are safe to eat.
The word radiation creates fear in people.
The 15 bluefin tuna caught and tested off California's coast last summer showed low levels of radiation, but still 10 times higher than normal. Scientists say it's the first time a fast-moving migrating fish has been shown to carry radioactivity from Japanese waters.
We almost didn't believe it, to tell you the truth.
Dr. Nicholas Fisher, professor of marine sciences, co-authored the study.
Every single fish was significantly contaminated with 2 radioisotopes of cesium. And these are common waste products from nuclear accidents.
The research shows the bluefin tuna that spawn and feed in the waters near the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant migrated some 6,000 miles, reaching Southern California just a few months after the disaster. Though the sample fish are contaminated, the levels are far lower than what's considered dangerous. Today, the FDA said they'll continue to monitor for radiation, and no public health concern has been detected.
I don't think I'll change the way that I eat, not at the moment. It's definitely made me alter just a little bit, not eat quite so much.
Look at the tuna jumping right there.
Massive in size, up to 10 feet, and weighing more than 1,000 pounds, Pacific bluefin tuna is a delicacy, often eaten as sushi around the world. Scientists say the real test on how radiation affects migrating fish will come this summer. Researchers will look at fish that have spent more time in contaminated waters and could have even higher levels of pollution.
I think that is a distinct possibility, and we honestly don't know the answer.
Today, Japanese officials announced they'll conduct more testing in their waters. This as researchers here do the same. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, San Pedro, California.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
They'll be calling you a radical, Kevin Blanch and San Simeon. Now, it's important that you don't have to crawl all the way out here to get a look at starfish and tide pools. These columns on the bottoms of these historic pillars are really the canary, because you could see a red, crimson, a purple, and orange starfish, which these columns are infamous for them. You could spot them a mile away. There's none. There's zero.
So I have a question for you guys. Where is everybody today? Where's Arnie? Where's Helen? Where is everybody? Where are the nuke experts today? On a day like today, 7 years after we're dealing with the worst industrial accident to ever happen to humanity, the worst thing to ever happen to humanity, nobody's around. Nobody's doing interviews. Nobody's releasing any information. The information that has been released from the BBC and from Live Science and from all these mainstream, corrupt fake news outlets. There's a lady who's been taking pictures of mutations around 3 Mile Island for the last, 30 years or however long. When was it? 79? And in she's known to the entire community as the mutation lady. And so people call her and have them come over and take pictures of mutated stuff in their gardens and trees and everything. And she's been doing this. This is the lady that I was supposed to help scan her entire collection, which basically fills a room in her house, and it's in shoe boxes. She told me that every house where she's photographed mutations, someone in that house developed cancer. And she knows this community inside and out. That's what we have to look forward to. If by some miracle on the 7-year anniversary, the whole world learned the truth about the accident, how many people would actually care? How many people would actually have the understanding that this affects them and their families and their children and their offspring and their DNA? How many people would? How many people would care?
It is a unique form.
TEPCO, the company that owns the crippled plant, is still struggling to deal with the disaster. All 4 reactors are still emitting radiation, but TEPCO has made some progress.
This is what TEPCO wants us to see, the heart of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
But it will be far more difficult to retrieve fuel from 3 other reactors that melted down. Those are so radioactive that the technology to dismantle them does not exist yet. TEPCO injects hundreds of tons of water daily into the reactors to keep them cool. But groundwater is pouring into the damaged reactors and has to be pumped out and stored.
They can't build these tanks fast enough. An additional 400 tons of contaminated water needs to be stored every day. That's as much water as the average American household uses in a year.
Cesium is water soluble and quickly makes its way into soils and waters. It's the same atomic family as potassium, and it mimics it, acting as a macronutrient. It quickly becomes ubiquitous in contaminated ecosystems. Long-lived radionuclides, such as cesium-137, are something new to us as a species. They did not exist on Earth in any appreciable quantities during the entire evolution of complex life. Although they are invisible to our senses, they are millions of times more poisonous than most of the common poisons we are familiar with. Because cancer, leukemia, genetic mutations, birth defects, malformations, and abortions at concentrations almost below human recognition and comprehension. They are lethal at the atomic or molecular level. They emit radiation, invisible forms of matter and energy that we might compare to fire, because radiation burns and destroys human tissue. But unlike the fire of fossil fuels, the nuclear fire that issues forth from radioactive elements cannot be extinguished. It is not a fire that can be scattered or suffocated, because it burns at the atomic level. It comes from the disintegration of single atoms.
Some may have concerns about Fukushima. Let me assure you, the situation is under control. It has never done and will never do any damage.
Many Americans are also worried about the potential risks to the United States. So I want to be very clear. We do not expect harmful levels of radiation to reach the West Coast, Hawaii, Alaska, or U.S. territories in the Pacific. That is the judgment of our Nuclear Regulatory Commission and many other experts.
You're a liar! Are you lying to me? Are you a liar? Are you lying to me? Are you a liar?
Hillary Clinton signed a pact with her counterpart in Japan, saying that she agreed that there are no problems with Japanese food supplies, and we would continue to buy them.
Furthermore, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and public health experts do not recommend that people in the United States take precautionary measures beyond staying informed. And going forward, we will continue to keep the American people fully updated, because I believe that you must know what I know as president.
When does the lying stop? When does the lying stop? When does the lying stop?
If Japan has nothing to hide, why are they hiding Japan? Why does Japan not even exist anymore? Why is it that I can show you endless lies, now for 988 days I believe this is, of endless lies, just endless, lie, non-stop. That's their legacy. It's never told the truth once, not a single time. Not one freaking time have they told us the truth. Fabrication, misdirections, misrepresentation, and outrageous, deadly, vicious lies.
They didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is, honestly...
What difference at this point does it make?
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
They'll be calling you a radical.
Japan is going to kill the planet. This is killing the planet. Not going to kill the planet, it's killed the planet, essentially already.
The way you like it, radiation trade deals. You know, you got to have something to wash down that chlorinated chicken or Squeaker Liam, the despot, arms dealing, testosterone inject beef. You know, you're going to need hormones to cope with the Tory homelessness and rickets. Free peach juice will grow some hair on your mutant Tories. He was there knocking it back like a Jaeger bomb, peach Fukushima bomb. You know, it's the demon seed. It has 25 million years shelf life. It's going to cost more than Brexit. Boris is a glow stick. How would we know if it affected him anyway? Fukushima fresh fish to replace our depleted stocks of cod with depleted uranium tuna. Oblivion on a ship of fools. Bozo drinking Fukushima peach juice. Another day, another somersault.
Back to Fukushima and fainting goats, the epic denial. You know, look, the American populace heard it off the fucking cliff. Good sheep, good sheep, good sheep.
But if the cooling fails, the temperature could rise to over 1,200 degrees. This temperature is hot enough to melt the fuel rods.
They'll be calling you a radical. These are major global issues. This is the greatest syndicated crime freaking network in the history. These are hardcore fucking criminals. I will make you piss your pants. And all you softball fucking acts, you need to sit the fuck down. This is a fucking war. And this is a war, and we're going to fight it. This is going to be Barry Antoinette. Barack Obama wants this to be his crowning jewel. He was completely 100% propped up by the nuclear industry. He's been on his horrible, grotesque presidency that he tricked everybody. He fucking put the golf, the fucking Fukushima, and all you fuckers that don't think Fukushima, you need to get fucking real, come out of reality. Fukushima's not going, it's the greatest ecological catastrophe. It's killing the Pacific Ocean. Clams all closed, fucking fishing in Oregon. The Kenai's fucking shut. Fishing on those sardines, sardine fishing is fucking, the whole industry's collapsing. You fuckers need to wake the fuck up and come out of denial. You can fucking be all softball all you want. All you want. But I'm here to fucking tell you, it ain't going away, and it's killing you right now, you softball fucking, you fuckers, you fuckers, you fuckers, you fuckers.
My family lives basically on the north boundary of the power plant. I don't have any problem with that. There's a lot of decisions to make when you're a mom. What's the safest thing I should do for my child? And so with nuclear energy, I think they think the safest thing is to be against it. But I think moms should be the most vocal supporters of nuclear power.
Moms also need to look at the negative impacts of everything else, the chemicals in solar panels and how much land they take up. That doesn't mean you're anti-renewable. That just means you're being realistic about the tools at our disposal.
Nuclear's, we need it for climate change, Dana. We need it. Jesus, there's climate change, Dana. It won't, Dana won't give us a break. I'm just mimicking the typical nuclear academic scientist pro-nuclear watching. Dana fucker. That's what they call me. They call me Dana fucker. Dana little fucker. The fucking pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear bastard. No, man. You guys are crazies. You're fucking crazies. It's not like a banana, bird brain. Okay? You've just been lied to your whole fucking life, moron. Dummy. Useless fucking dipstick. You greased monkey, bird brain, dipstick. It's much worse than what we're looking at. It's much worse than that. 5,000 counts per minute is a dead man walking. The 43% of children is off the charts. If you can take it into consideration, it should be 1 in a million. And TEPCO is now just the Japanese government themselves, who don't even look at internal radiation doses. This guy got hit with gamma showing. Some mass murder machine decided that they were going to walk. See, you picked up 30 million bags. 30 million bags. And do you get that? 30 million bags? Which is such a betrayal. What a horrible... Can you imagine? Could there possibly be anybody worse? We cover the shit nuclear scientists say all the time. So if a scientist tells you any of these connotations, walking in the sunshine, more radiation, eating a banana, sleeping next to somebody, more radiation, eating potato chips, more radiation, climbing a mountain, more radiation, flying on a plane, or that radiation is everywhere and radiation is good for you, in the context of man-made nuclear.
This sentiment that we've seen where people are questioning whether you're trustworthy.
I can only tell you that this has been a theme for many, many years, and I have great confidence. I trust because I think weigh these kinds of accusations, filled with substantiated. Of course, that's going to raise questions in people's minds.
Would you vote for someone that you don't trust?
Well, people should and do. I cannot decide what, no matter how founded, and I'm well aware of the fact, and that's all I can.
2018, Dana Dunford, your host, thenuclearproctologist.org. Yeah, I went up and done expeditions on your coastline, 260 days, 15,000 miles of the Canadian coastline. I noticed all your species were missing in your tidal zones. All your algae were missing, 700 algae, 78 species of sea anemones. We only found a couple. 70 species of sponges. We only found a few. The list goes on and on and on. All the species are missing. Yeah, what's going on? How come you're not telling people?
I can forward you to our order. We're about.
With the utmost respect and admiration for this entire solar system, let alone planet Earth. This little speck that we should treasure, but yet we do everything but. It defies any logic. The sharks in the real world, most people have no concept of the ocean, of the millions of species, of how that's the entire ecosystem for not just humans, but the flora and the fauna. The entire system is now in heart attack mode because of nuclear. 74 years of nuclear. 74 years of people in the know being silent and silenced is horrifying. It's a horrifying revelation. We're filled with fluff to the point where we don't understand real. We have nothing but fake heroes. We lay waste to the most precious thing in our solar system. We spend enormous amount of money looking for another planet while we destroy our own planet. Now, how can a building, imagine if an alien came from space and he destroyed Japan and we have to evacuate North America. You would get it, yeah? But something invisible that you can't see or smell or taste or hear or feel or pick up or throw rocks at or chase away, something you can't put per se in a perspective that's tangible, like a storm, you could see it. A snowstorm, you can feel it. You know, a big fire, forest fire, you can see the smoke coming your way, everything's covered in ash, a volcano goes off. All of these things have earthquakes, you feel it shakes everything. But if you have a nuclear accident in a single building, you can destroy a country, an ocean, and a continent as it marches through the entire planet. How is that even conceivable? And so people can live in denial and say, nah, it's okay, I'm not going to check and see if it's real, all they want. And then it's too late. Then they're going to lose everything at that stage. Like if there was a forest fire coming, imagine your neighbors, it's okay, they'll put it out. And you're like, no, you better grab everything. They're telling everybody to evacuate. Look, everybody's leaving. That's okay, I'm special. It's not going to happen to this neighborhood. I live here all my life. It's never happened before. And then you'll read the headlines where they lost everything and people that try to rescue them lost their lives and were destroyed. And that'll be the same legacy with nuclear. They say there's no fallout. I show you 30 million one-ton bags. They say the community's okay. The communities were evacuated. They say they got it under control, but they're only bringing the homeless, the destitute, and the victims of society there. That is their legacy. That is their legacy. They have done that over and over and over. They say the fuel pools are on top of the building, but that's the reactor core you're looking at. Jacked out of the reactor. The pools were above it. They tell you they got under control, but there's no buildings left. They've done everything and anything. They've even arrested me when I came ashore. He took pictures. Scum. And they gave me 6 gag orders, so I couldn't talk about the people that were lying to you and manipulating you. Because they had to protect their assets. And they had to vilify me. I was the bad man. I'm the bad man for taking pictures and saying, hey, you know, woo-hoo-hoo, guess what? Somehow, that has morphed into I'm the worst villain on the planet at this stage. But yet, all I do is provide the documentation. All I do is talk about the lies that they're telling you and show you the truth. But that time isn't, we are now at the crux of history where we kill all the species and everybody's still sleepwalking, but not everybody. I'm telling you right now, it's disgusting. I'm enraged. What kind of country is this? What kind of world am I living in? Is there anybody out there with any integrity? Is there anybody on the planet that even cares anymore? Are you so lost in your little world that you're going to sit there and passively let these monsters, these animals, these despicable creatures wreck our planet and then hide it away? It's unbelievable that I got to come out here and do what I got to do because nobody else will do it. And even your own media, your despicable media, your disgusting, maniacal, twisted, heartless, spineless media cannot even walk down to the beach and do a species count. How is that possible? Where did we lose that part of humanity? Where is humanity? Why doesn't humanity exist anymore? They're telling that lie, that story, to fuck everybody. Just like he says on the phone, well, I don't know what are you talking about? What? I'm here, I don't see nothing. What? There's nothing happening. What? Are you sure, mister? I don't know what you're talking about. You should talk to a journalist. I'm just a dummy with a phone, mister. I'm a stupid moron who can't think. I'm a bird brain. I'm a dipstick, mister. I'm a bird. You need to talk to the journalist. I'm too stupid, mister. I can't help you, mister. You're too smart, mister. You scared me, mister. You can't do nothing with them. There's only one of you. There's lots of them, Dana. We got to protect them, Dana. They're the lawyers, not you, Dana. You're telling the truth. You can't tell the truth, Dana. Why tell the truth, Dana? Just tell a lie, Dana. Because to come out and tell everybody everything is normal, you crossed the fucking line. You crossed that line. You're literally the devil by telling people there's nothing to worry about. You're the most twisted, heartless person imaginable. You're the most monstrous bastard on this fucking planet. And truly the biggest coward imaginable. You're a total coward. You're a total chicken neck. You're a total fucking monster. You're the creepiest fucking thing imaginable. It is time for you to grow up. It's time for you to gut up. It's time for you to man up. It's time for you to be somebody. It's time for you to help each other. It's time for you to band together. It's time for you to protect your own, because they're not going to protect you. It's time for you to make that stand. It's time for you to take those responsibilities. It's time for you to take care of your own business. And these people are trying to fuck you and murder you. It's time to take care of your business. You better fucking take care of it, because they will destroy you. They will wreck your hopes, your dreams in a heartbeat for one paycheck. You better believe it. Will you fight for the planet? And you better wake up. I'm tired of your excuses. I'm tired of your betrayals. I'm tired of you sitting there in silence. I'm tired of you rejecting the facts. I'm tired of you playing stupid. I'm tired of you being a bubblehead. I'm tired of you being a self-centered, egotistic, arrogant pricks. I'm tired of your pompous, hubris nature. We're talking about an extinction event playing out right before your eyes. You're going to wake up at the last second and you're going to shit your pants. You're going to panic. You're going to get fucking stomped. Lie after fucking lie. Where did all the species go? Fukushima. You can't fucking learn a thing about real life? You can't wrap your mind around that there's more things on the planet than humans? That there's 8 million species here and that we are the stewards? Whether we like it or not, this is our obligation. You can find money for all your toys and your fancy lifestyle, and to hide away from the truth and hope that it solves itself is not. It might have done it every other time, but it ain't going to solve itself this time.
Why is this being downplayed? Is it a liability issue, or do they want to prevent panic? Do you have any ideas why this is being minimized?
I know someone who's very highly placed in the State Department, and the United States government has come up with a decision. And I don't know whether it's influenced by a fear of panic or commercial interests or whatever, but I do know that the United States government, at the highest levels of the State Department, as well as other departments, FDA and on, have made a decision to downplay Fukushima. And I can't speak for the Canadian counterparts, but I will say that back in April, Hillary Clinton signed a pact with her counterpart in Japan, saying that she agreed that there are no problems with Japanese food supplies, and we would continue to buy them. So we are not sampling this material as it comes into the country because our government, the U.S., has made a decision, strategic decision, to downplay it. I don't know if that's because they want to support the Japanese government or whether they want to support the nuclear industry, but I do know that that decision was made at the highest levels of government.
The newest video of the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant's #1 reactor shows that its foundation is severely damaged. The video, which was taken by the operator Tokyo Electric Power Company, shows the internal wall of a cylindrical concrete pedestal supporting the reactor pressure vessel. The debris shown in the video comes from the fallen structure and possible melted nuclear fuel. Around a meter of the concrete wall of the foundation is missing, exposing the reinforcing bar. TEPCO plans to further analyze the video and assess the seismic resistance of the pedestal.
The IAEA has now finished its assessment of Japan's plans to release the water stored at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. Our independent and comprehensive assessment confirms the plans to be in line with IAEA safety standards.
The IAEA has published its findings in a report that was presented to the Japanese government. The report compiled findings from an independent IAEA safety review spanning 2 years.
The water will be released from a tunnel, a kilometer off the Japanese coast. As I promised, our work here is not yet over. Assessing a plan is not enough. My experts will come back to Fukushima repeatedly, and for as long as the process takes to take samples at different locations and confirm the water remains safe. A clean ocean matters to us all.
And I cover pretty well Fukushima extensively only, per se.
They'll be calling you a radical. All hands on deck. They'll be calling you a radical. All hands on deck. All hands on deck. All anti-nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. Just let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. This is not nature. They don't care. All hands on deck, all hands on deck. They don't care. I cannot believe this is being mass murder right in front of your fucking eyes, and no one gives a fuck. They don't care. This is the greatest fucking denial in human history. They don't care. This is the most unnatural thing in the history of the planet. They don't care. Hello, the greatest ecological catastrophe in human fucking history is ongoing. They don't care. The fucking greatest ecosystem on the planet, the Pacific Ocean, is being mass murdered right in front of your fucking eyes, and no one gives a fuck. They don't care.
They're heading for Alaska.
They'll be calling you a radical. You're not gonna believe this one. They're hypnotized. They're hypnotized. They don't care. When are you guys gonna wake up and realize they've declared war on you and your children?
They don't care.
Oh, what?
So the boat kind of wanders back and forth sometimes?
I cannot believe this is the greatest denial in human history. Hello?
They don't care.
Fukushima. It rained all over us. All hands on deck.
Looks good. 7 knots, 6.7.
They're trying to kill us. Don't you see? I mean, hello. They're killing you.
Just let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. This is not nature.
This is the most unnatural thing in the history of the planet. Hello, the greatest ecological catastrophe in human fucking history is ongoing. The fucking greatest ecosystem on the planet, the Pacific Ocean, is being mass murdered right in front of your fucking eyes.
They don't care.
Can't you see? Can anybody fucking stand up before we're all dead and then you're dead?
They don't care.
Cruising along, destination on shore.
They don't care.
They don't care. Right in your fucking face!
And so far in the last 20 miles, we only seen one bird.
They don't care.
Brutal. There's nothing alive. It's like we're on the moon or something.
They don't